The air inside Bucharest National Stadium didn't just vibrate, it thundered. 80,000 voices became one living, roaring organism that shook the metal beams and rolled across the night sky like a living storm. The stage was a world of light and smoke. Michael Jackson stood in the center of it, a silhouette carved in gold and silver, his sequin jacket catching every flash of the strobe lights. His black fedora shadowed his face, and each tiny movement, each flick of his wrist, each step of his feet, drew screams that felt like earthquakes. The Billie Jean bass line pulsed like a heartbeat through the ground. The floor vibrated beneath fans who had waited all night, some all their lives, just to be in the same space as a man who seemed too mythical to be real. And then it happened. A blur moved in the corner of Michael's vision. At first, everyone assumed it was part of the choreography, a new dancer maybe, or a crew member entering for a dramatic effect. But then came the screams. Not cheers, screams of panic. A man had jumped the barricade. He was running, sprinting straight toward the stage. The cameras caught the glint of sequins, a fedora, and one unmistakable white glove. For a split second, the crowd froze. It looked unreal, like a mirror breaking free of its frame. The fan was dressed exactly like Michael. Every detail, the black loafers, the cropped trousers, the glittering jacket, the armband. Even the socks glowed under the spotlights. The stage crew shouted. Security reacted too late. The man was fast, desperate. He dodged the guard's tackle, stumbled forward, and clambered up the side scaffolding with wild determination. By the time the guards reached the stage, he was already standing in front of Michael Jackson himself. The music stopped. The lights froze. The silence hit harder than any sound could have. 80,000 people stopped breathing. Michael stood motionless, a living statue in black and gold. The fan, panting and shaking, looked up at him like a pilgrim reaching the end of a sacred journey. For a terrifying moment, no one knew what was about to happen. The fan's chest rose and fell. His hand trembled as he pointed, not in anger, but disbelief. "Michael," he gasped. "Oh my God, Michael, I just wanted to see you." Security swarmed the edge of the stage, waiting for the command to act. But Michael's voice, soft yet amplified across the entire stadium, broke through the tension. "Wait!" That single word froze everyone, guards, fans, camera operators, even the band. Michael lowered his microphone slowly. His expression didn't change, unreadable, calm, almost otherworldly. The spotlight widened until it held only two figures, the global icon and the trembling stranger trying to be him. "Who are you?" Michael asked quietly, his voice carrying like silk through the air. The fan was shaking, tears spilling down his face. "I'm you," he said hoarsely. "Or, I tried to be." The audience gasped, the sound rippling like waves across the stands. Michael's gaze softened. He didn't flinch, didn't call for help. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if studying a reflection in a cracked mirror. "You tried to be me?" he asked. The fan nodded, voice trembling. "I learned every move. I watched every concert. You saved my life, man. You gave me something to live for." The crowd murmured, not mockery, but awe. This wasn't an intruder anymore. It was a soul standing in front of his idol, trembling under the weight of a dream. Security moved again, but Michael lifted his hand once more, calm, commanding, absolute. "Let him be," he said. And then, with quiet gravity, Michael extended his own gloved hand. "Come closer." The man hesitated, his body shaking, but he took a step forward, then another, until he was just a few feet away. Up close, Michael could see the imperfection in the costume, sequins glued unevenly, fabric fraying at the cuffs. The glove was handmade. The hat was too large. The imitation was flawed, and yet somehow more beautiful for it. Michael smiled faintly. "You really did try." The fan let out a strangled laugh through tears. "I just wanted you to see me once before I die." The entire arena gasped. Michael took one more step forward and said softly, "You don't have to die to be seen." A beat of silence. Then the crowd erupted in cheers that shook the heavens. The man covered his face and sobbed. Michael placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now." The lights dimmed around them, leaving just that one golden spotlight. 2 men, 1 dream, and 80,000 witnesses to a moment that would become legend. And as the crowd roared, Michael leaned close and said something only the fan could hear. "Stay. We're not done yet." The music would start again soon. But before it did, the world had already changed. That was the night Michael Jackson met his mirror and decided not to turn away. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The bass from Billie Jean faded into a heartbeat. Soft, steady, human. Fog drifted low across the stage floor like smoke on water. Michael and the fan, Daniel, though the world didn't know his name yet, stood face to face beneath a halo of white light. The roar of the crowd had become a reverent hush, the kind you'd find in cathedrals before a revelation. Michael's posture was relaxed, but his gaze was sharp, patient, assessing, compassionate. Daniel's knees trembled. He looked like he might faint from adrenaline alone. "I didn't mean to scare anyone," Daniel stammered, his voice amplified through the silence. I had to be here. I had to show you what you mean to me." Michael didn't move. He waited, letting the silence stretch until it felt like time itself was holding its breath. "Show me what?" he finally asked, his tone gentle, almost fatherly. "That you saved me," Daniel said. "You don't even know me, but you did." The words cracked open the air. Even from the upper tiers, people could feel the sincerity bleeding through. Daniel's voice shook. "When I was a kid, I didn't have much. My dad was gone. My mom worked 2 jobs. But I had you. I had your music. I watched you every day. I learned every move, every spin, every kick. When I danced like you, I didn't feel poor. I didn't feel invisible. I felt free." A soft sound rippled through the stands. Thousands of sniffles. Michael nodded slowly. He understood that kind of devotion because he'd lived it. As a boy, he'd stood before posters of James Brown, mimicking the master's every move. And now, in some strange twist of fate, he was the one being copied, the idol looking at his own reflection. "What's your name?" Michael asked. "Daniel," the fan whispered. Michael smiled. "Daniel, you've come a long way." Daniel laughed nervously, wiping his tears. "Too far, maybe. I think they're going to drag me out of here after this." Michael grinned faintly. "Not tonight." The crowd cheered. Michael turned toward the band. "Hold the music." Then he looked back at Daniel. "You said you've been practicing?" Daniel nodded. "Every day. I know all your moves, the spin, the moonwalk, the lean, everything." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Everything." Daniel smiled sheepishly. "Everything." "Then show me," Michael said. The stadium gasped in unison. Daniel froze, eyes wide. What? Michael stepped back a few paces, creating space between them. "Show me what you've got." The lights shifted instantly, as if the universe obeyed him. A single spotlight now framed both men. The band held their instruments. Waiting, Daniel took a deep breath. His hands shook. His breath came shallow. But then he shut his eyes, and for the first time that night, the fear left his face. The music kicked in, Billie Jean's bass line slow and deliberate. Daniel moved. The first step was stiff, uncertain. Then came the spin. Too wide, off balance. He stumbled. The crowd gasped. Michael began to clap. Once, twice, slowly, rhythmically. The audience followed. Clap, clap, clap. The sound filled the stadium like thunder. Daniel found his footing, his rhythm, his courage. He began to move in time. A kick, a slide, a turn. The crowd roared encouragement with every step. And then he did it. The moonwalk. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. 80,000 people exploded into cheers. When the song ended, Daniel stood panting, trembling, tears streaking down his face. He looked at Michael like a child waiting for approval. Michael smiled, took a step forward, and extended his hand. "Dance with me?" The arena erupted again, a sound like an earthquake made of joy. Michael nodded to the band. "Bring it back in." The music swelled. Michael moved, effortlessly weightless, and Daniel followed a half beat behind. Their shadows merged into one, on the stage floor. For those few minutes, the king of pop and the boy who worshiped him became one heartbeat, one rhythm, one act of courage made flesh. When the music finally faded, Michael leaned into the mic and said softly, "Don't ever let anyone laugh at your dreams." The audience screamed, cried, and clapped until the sound became endless. Daniel fell to his knees, sobbing into his hands. Michael lifted him gently, whispered, "You've got heart. Never lose it." As the crowd roared his name, Daniel turned to see 80,000 people standing. Not for Michael, but for him. And behind him, Michael Jackson smiled quietly, his hand over his heart, knowing exactly what he had done. He had turned imitation into inspiration. The lights dimmed to a low, golden glow, a heartbeat pulsing in sync with the rhythm of 80,000 souls. Daniel stood frozen, chest heaving, sweat glistening on his brow. The echo of the last cheer still hung in the air, vibrating to the steel bones of the stadium. He couldn't tell if his legs were shaking from adrenaline or disbelief. Michael Jackson, the Michael Jackson, stood a few feet away, head tilted, eyes kind. The moment had already defied every law of logic. A fan had jumped on stage, broken through security, and instead of being dragged away, he was standing shoulder to shoulder with the most famous performer on earth. But Michael wasn't finished. He took a small step closer, microphone still in hand, and said in that calm, velvet-smooth voice that carried through every speaker in the world, "Let's finish it together." The crowd exploded in a single, unified roar that rolled through the night like thunder. Daniel's breath hitched. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. Michael smiled gently. "You started it," he said. "Now let's make it something to remember." He turned toward the band and lifted his hand. "Bring it back, slow," he said. "Give us a groove." The drummer's sticks clicked together twice, and the familiar heartbeat of Billie Jean returned, slower, deeper, and more deliberate. It didn't sound like a concert anymore. It sounded like destiny tuning itself. Michael adjusted his hat, the brim casting a sharp shadow across his face. The stadium screen zoomed in close. The gloved hand, the glittering jacket, the faint smile of a man completely at peace in chaos. Then he moved. One smooth slide, one flick of the wrist, every gesture precise and effortless. He glided across the stage as if time itself had loosened around him. The crowd screamed, the kind of scream that people only let out once in a lifetime. Daniel watched, frozen, until Michael turned his head slightly, giving him a look that said, "Your turn." Daniel took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped forward. He mirrored the move, the slide, the flick, the spin. It wasn't perfect. His feet stuck slightly to the stage, but his energy was pure, raw, alive. Michael clapped in rhythm. The band kept the beat steady, the bass line heavy and patient, like a heartbeat waiting for courage to bloom. "Yeah," Michael shouted, grinning now, feeding off energy. "That's it." The crowd responded, chanting Daniel's name without even knowing it. "Dance! Dance! Dance!" Daniel spun again, once, twice, then hit a freeze pose, his chest heaving, his gloves shining under the lights. The audience erupted in cheers, so loud they drowned out the music. Michael laughed, genuinely delighted. He threw his arm around Daniel's shoulders, pulling him closer. "You've got the fire," he said into the mic. "Don't ever lose it." The lights shifted, beams of blue and silver spiraling around them. For the first time that night, Michael wasn't performing for the crowd. He was performing with someone. And Daniel, trembling with joy, understood something profound. He wasn't just copying a legend anymore. He was sharing the stage with one. Michael stepped back, letting the music breathe. Then, with a smooth motion, he signaled the band to stop. The crowd fell silent, the sudden quiet like a rush of wind. Michael looked at Daniel. "You ready for one more?" Daniel blinked. "What?" Michael grinned mischievously, the way he did before breaking into an iconic move. "Let's give them a show." He turned to the audience and said into the microphone, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a brave soul up here tonight. Let's see if he can handle Smooth Criminal." The crowd lost its mind. The opening beats hit, crisp, staccato, menacing. The white spotlight hit them both, cutting through the smoke. Michael's body shifted, every muscle turning electric. He threw a quick nod to Daniel, a silent invitation. The two men began to move together. Sharp, precise, alive. Michael's lean. Daniel's attempt to match it, shaky but determined. Michael's spin. Daniel's stumble. Then, to everyone's surprise, Daniel improvised a quick shuffle, a hop, a kick, and somehow, impossibly, it worked. Michael stopped mid-step, eyes wide, and then burst into laughter. Real laughter, bright and boyish. "Okay," he shouted, clapping his hands. "Okay." The crowd roared even louder. Daniel grinned through tears, the surrealness of it all overwhelming him. His childhood hero was laughing with him, not at him. As the song hit its bridge, Michael motioned for the lights to dim. The giant LED screen behind them showed a slow-motion replay of Daniel's brave shuffle. The crowd screamed his name. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael said into the mic, smiling, "give it up for my brother, Daniel." The sound was deafening. Daniel dropped to his knees, covered his face, sobbing openly now. The emotion, the years of imitation, ridicule, loneliness, all pouring out in one unstoppable flood. Michael crouched beside him, the camera zooming in to capture a sight that would echo for decades. The king of pop with his arm around a trembling fan, whispering words no microphone could catch. Later, Daniel would say those words changed his life. Michael had said, "It's not about being me, it's about believing you can be something great too." When the music faded, Michael stood and helped Daniel to his feet. The fan's knees were weak. His tears glittered under the lights like shattered diamonds. Michael lifted his arm high into the air, clasping Daniel's hand. "This," he said, voice ringing clear through the microphone, "is what love looks like." The arena erupted. Fans cried. Security guards clapped. Even the cameraman couldn't stop smiling. Daniel turned slowly, taking in the sight. Tens of thousands of people cheering for him. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a copy. He felt seen. Michael leaned toward him and said quietly, "Remember this moment. It's yours now." Daniel nodded, overwhelmed. And then, with one final look, a smile, a nod, a gesture of pure gratitude, Michael stepped back into the shadows, giving the stage to Daniel completely. For one breathtaking minute, under the roar of 80,000 people, the fan who had once been invisible stood alone in the light. Not as a replica, not as a trespasser, but as a man brave enough to dance beside his hero. The music faded, the lights dimmed, and history once again was written in rhythm. The crowd was still roaring, a living sea of sound and flashing lights. The moment felt infinite, like the universe had stopped to watch something sacred unfold. Daniel stood center stage, chest heaving, still holding Michael Jackson's hand. Sweat streamed down his face, but so did tears. Pure, unstoppable tears of disbelief and gratitude. Michael's gloved hand lifted Daniel's arm high into the air, and the crowd's cheers rose again, louder than fireworks. The camera zoomed in, projecting the two of them onto the massive Jumbotron screens towering over the stadium. Two men, one idolized, one unknown, bathed in the same light. Michael smiled, lowered the mic, and said softly, "You've got courage, Daniel. That's something the world doesn't see enough of." Daniel tried to speak, but his voice broke. He could only shake his head, overwhelmed. Michael turned toward the audience, his voice strong again through the speakers. "This man came up here tonight because he believed. That's what it's all about, believing in yourself, believing in love. Because love," he paused, placing a hand over his heart, "love never fails." The words rolled to the stadium like thunder cloaked in gentleness. The audience erupted again, some people screaming, others crying. A woman in the front row fell to her knees. In the far stands, strangers hugged one another. Even the security guards, moments ago ready to tackle Daniel, were now smiling in awe. Michael turned to the band, gesturing softly. "Let's give him something beautiful." The stage lights dimmed to a soft, celestial blue. The air changed, no longer electric, but tender. A single note rang out on the keyboard, followed by the first chord of "You Are Not Alone." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Michael took a step closer to Daniel and spoke quietly, though his mic caught every word. "This one's for everyone who ever felt invisible," he said. "You're not alone. None of you." Then he began to sing. His voice, pure, trembling with feeling, filled the stadium like a prayer. Every syllable seemed to carry warmth, forgiveness, and something even deeper, truth. Daniel stood frozen beside him, his tears falling freely now. He wasn't just standing next to his hero anymore. He was part of something divine. As the chorus rose, Michael held the microphone out toward him. "Come on," he said softly. "Sing with me." Daniel's lips parted. The crowd quieted, the roar fading into a fragile silence. He hesitated, just for a moment, then began to sing. His voice was shaky, uneven, but it came from somewhere raw and real. "You're not alone." The words trembled into the air, and the crowd's reaction was immediate. Not laughter, not surprise, but empathy. They began to clap softly, keeping rhythm, giving Daniel courage with every beat. Michael smiled and harmonized with him, their voices blending, one angelic, one imperfect, but together forming something transcendent. As the second verse began, the lights expanded, washing over the entire crowd. From every corner of the stadium, tens of thousands of fans raised their phones, their flashlights, their candles, a galaxy of light flickering in the darkness. It wasn't a concert anymore. It was communion. The camera panned across the audience. Tears, smiles, awe. People who had never met each other were swaying together, singing softly. Even from the nosebleed seats, you could feel the vibration of love echoing through the ground. Michael turned to Daniel and gave him a small nod. "Your turn," he whispered. Daniel blinked, confused. "What?" Michael smiled, his eyes glowing with kindness. "Sing it. Just one line." Daniel's throat tightened. He looked out at the endless crowd, a sea of lights and faces, all waiting. His voice quavered as he sang. "But you are not alone." The response was immediate, explosive. The audience screamed his name, clapped, and chanted. It wasn't about his voice. It was about his heart. Michael placed his arm around Daniel's shoulders, pulled him close, and whispered into the mic, "See? They love you too." The music swelled. Michael took over again, his voice soaring like wind above mountains. Daniel, overcome, could only weep into his hands as the final chorus echoed across the night sky. As the song ended, the lights faded down to near darkness. A hush fell over the arena, the kind of silence that follows revelation. Michael turned off his mic for a moment and spoke directly to Daniel. "People think being on the stage makes you powerful," he said softly. "But real power is being able to lift someone else up here with you." Daniel looked at him through tears. "You already did that, Michael." Michael smiled. "Then do it for someone else one day." He turned back to the audience, microphone lifted once more, and said into the silence, "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we learned something important. You don't need to be a superstar to make the world better. You just need to care, to believe, to love." The crowd erupted again, chants of "Michael, Michael, and thank you," filling the air like the sound of waves crashing on shore. Daniel, overwhelmed, tried to bow. Michael stopped him gently and whispered, "Don't bow to me. Stand tall." Daniel nodded, wiping his tears. Michael lifted their joined hands one final time, and the spotlights blazed bright, flooding the stage, the crowd, and the night sky in white. The camera captured the image that would circle the globe for decades. Michael Jackson, smiling, his arm around a fan dressed like him, bathed in light, surrounded by a sea of glowing candles and phone screens. The moment froze in time. Then Michael spoke the final words of the night before walking away, his voice soft but strong. "Love is the only thing worth imitating." He lowered his microphone. The lights went black. And for one eternal second, the world stayed silent, until the first tearful cheer broke the stillness and the dam of emotion burst. Fans screamed, cried, hugged strangers. Security didn't move. Even the camera operators stood frozen, tears in their eyes. Backstage, the crew whispered among themselves, stunned. They had seen Michael perform miracles on stage before, but never one quite like this. On that night in Bucharest, something more than music happened. Something more than fame or choreography or spectacle. It was healing. It was hope. It was humanity set to melody. And as Daniel walked off stage, still trembling, still crying, still clutching the fedora Michael had placed in his hands, he turned back for one last look. Michael was still standing there, motionless, silhouetted against the blinding light, watching him go, his hand over his heart. It wasn't just a concert anymore. It was a passing of the torch. The roar of the crowd faded into the cool Bucharest night, echoing far beyond the walls of the stadium. For hours, fans had refused to leave. They stood in the aisles, crying, clapping, calling Michael's name long after he'd stepped off stage. Even the air seemed unwilling to move on, as if the universe itself wanted to linger in the warmth he'd left behind. Backstage, Daniel sat on a folding chair, trembling, still clutching Michael's fedora in both hands. The sequins of his imitation jacket were torn, and his glove was streaked with sweat and tears. But his eyes burned with something new, a fire that no ridicule, no doubt, no poverty could ever extinguish again. A security guard approached him. "You okay, kid?" Daniel nodded slowly, staring down at the hat. "He talked to me," he whispered. "He sang with me. He saw me." The guard smiled faintly. "You're lucky, man. Most people get a handshake. You got a miracle." Michael appeared a few moments later, still glowing from the stage lights, though his expression was calm now, gentle, reflective. The room fell silent the moment he entered. Even the crew stopped talking. He walked straight to Daniel. "You did good out there," Michael said softly. Daniel rose awkwardly, hat in hand, still unsure if this was real. "I don't even know how to thank you," he said, his voice cracking. Michael smiled, that warm, quiet smile that had disarmed millions. "Don't thank me," he said. "Just remember what I told you out there. Don't imitate me. Inspire someone else." Daniel's chin quivered. "I will." Michael placed both hands on his shoulders. "Promise me." "I promise." Michael nodded, satisfied. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small silver pendant shaped like a heart and handed it to him. "This is from the Dangerous Tour," he said. "Keep it. It'll remind you what courage looks like." Daniel held it like it was made of light. "I'll never forget this night," he whispered. Michael's smile faded into something softer, almost sad. "Neither will I," he said quietly. Then, with a gentle squeeze on the shoulder, he turned and walked away down the corridor, disappearing into a sea of crew members and bodyguards. That was the last Daniel ever saw of him in person. The world reacts. By morning, the footage was everywhere. Fans who had recorded the moment on grainy camcorders uploaded it to early internet forums and news networks. Television stations played it on repeat. Reporters tried to frame it as another bizarre Jackson moment, but something about it defied cynicism. This wasn't spectacle. It was sincerity. The headlines flooded in across the world. Michael Jackson stops concert to embrace stage intruder, the fan who touched the king of pop the night music turned to mercy. Within 24 hours, millions had seen it. Within a week, the story was everywhere, in talk shows, newspapers, documentaries. And every retelling came with the same message. He turned fear into love. One American journalist put it best. When most performers would have called security, Jackson called for silence. He didn't see a threat, he saw a soul. The footage became legend. People replayed the exact moment when Michael extended his hand, when Daniel first broke into tears, when "You Are Not Alone" echoed through a sea of lights. It was more than a concert. It was a parable. Daniel's life changes forever. In the years that followed, Daniel's life transformed. He went back to his small apartment, but something inside him had shifted. He started teaching dance at a local youth center, not because he wanted fame, but because he wanted to share what Michael had given him: belief. At first, only a handful of kids showed up, shy, uncertain, wearing secondhand shoes and carrying dreams too fragile to say aloud. Daniel would look at them and remember his own trembling legs on that stage. He'd tell them, "You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be brave." News spread slowly. The man who danced with Michael Jackson was teaching again. Before long, his tiny dance class grew into a full foundation. He called it the Mirror Project, inspired by what Michael had said that night. You saw yourself in me. Now help others see themselves through you. Every year, on the anniversary of the concert, Daniel would play that same grainy footage for new students. The moment Michael had turned chaos into compassion. The moment a frightened fan became a teacher. And when Michael passed away in 2009, Daniel held a candlelight vigil outside the same stadium where it had all happened. Thousands came. He wore the same hat, the same glove. But this time, when people asked him to moonwalk, he smiled and said, "No, tonight's not about copying him. It's about continuing him." The enduring message. Years later, during a televised interview, a journalist asked him, "What did Michael whisper to you on that stage?" Daniel smiled, his eyes glistening. "He told me," he said, "you're enough just as you are." The host fell silent. So did the audience. Daniel continued, "I thought I needed to look like him, dance like him, be him. But that night, he showed me that love isn't about imitation. It's about reflection. He didn't just see me. He reminded me to see myself." The clip went viral. Once again, Michael's message through Daniel reached millions. In classrooms, workshops, motivational speeches, the story was retold as the night Michael healed the stage. It became a metaphor for grace, empathy, and the quiet power of understanding. Even psychologists cited it as a model of public de-escalation and compassion, how one act of love could transform hysteria into harmony. The final image. On the 10th anniversary of Michael's passing, a tribute concert was held in Los Angeles. At the end of the show, the organizers invited Daniel, now older, calmer, his hair flecked with silver, to step onto the same kind of stage once more. He wore the same hat Michael had given him and the silver pendant over his chest. When the crowd quieted, Daniel lifted the microphone and said, "I don't have Michael's voice. I don't have his moves. But I carry what he left in me, the courage to love." Then, as the lights dimmed, he began to sing softly, "You are not alone." The crowd joined in, tens of thousands of voices blending into one. Somewhere, in that harmony, Daniel swore he could hear his voice too, soft, smiling, timeless. As the song ended, Daniel looked up at the giant screen behind him. The image that filled was the one that had gone around the world decades earlier. Michael Jackson, smiling in the spotlight, arm around his trembling double, surrounded by a galaxy of lights. The audience rose to their feet. Tears fell freely, and as the screen faded to black, white letters appeared across it. "Love is the only thing worth imitating." The crowd applauded. Some whispered prayers. Others simply stood in silence, remembering the night when kindness redefined what it meant to be a king. Because legends perform songs, icons perform miracles. But Michael Jackson, on that night in Bucharest, did something rarer. He turned an interruption into inspiration, a fan into a believer, and a stage into sacred ground. And long after the lights went out, that moment kept shining, not in headlines or videos, but in the hearts of everyone who remembered the night the King of Pop became the King of Compassion. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.